So this is really the largest overview here is an invitation to this conversation, and also to consider. I'd like all of us to consider our relationship, our interaction with Asian culture over our lives. And I think that we all in this room we all in the world have had interaction with Asian culture to some degree, but in this room, we've just practiced something that was rooted coming from India, for instance, yoga. And so it seems as though, coming from my experience, I am a musician, I'll play a little bit later, and I went to India to learn music. And as a Westerner, there was a lot of different ways that I had to navigate learning a whole new cultural container. And after I spent a decade living in India, learning Raga music, and I think what kept me there was my interest in culture. And some of I was there learning music specifically, and I learned music as integral yoga as well. But even these questions as they kind of seep into culture. And I think every day I was in India, I love the adventure of the unknown, of like, I learned something new about Indian culture every single day. And there came with that a lot of complications as well. It's not so simple to understand per se why people do what they do or think the way they think. And part of my process was to immerse myself in this environment and to become an insider to whatever degree I could. Now, I never could become a Bengali person, for instance. That was not my goal, but I really could immerse myself in and really try to sit with them, with my guru and his family, the way that they sat, the way that they ate together, learning the language and whatnot. But I think I found myself experiencing the music, but on a larger level, I had a lot of questions about cross-cultural confluence. And there was a lot of questions that I felt, but I couldn't even articulate. And it took me actually coming to meet Debashish and read his book, that I felt that he was actually really very clearly and poignantly bringing up questions of cross-culturality, of the complications of a world in confluence, the ethical ramifications of colonialism. And all of these questions, I felt I didn't really have a background to necessarily pinpoint and understand, but there was a feeling inside that I really wanted to explore this more. And so that's a little bit about my engagement with Eastern traditions. And I think that that's kind of like the larger frame is this question of cultural studies. And maybe, do you want to share just a little bit about that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, probably, like, I'm not going to assume, but I'm going to say probably like most people, I'm not going to assume about this room anyway, but I came to discover sort of, Asian wisdom traditions through yoga asana. So through yoga studio culture, through practicing movement. And I'm from my family's from the Caribbean. I'm from New York City, but my family's from the Dominican Republic. And I was just saying to Jonathan earlier that, even to this day, they're like, yoga, like, it's just so, it's very other. Like, it might be other in general, but it's like 3 times more. They're much more comfortable now. So I, in trying to explain it to them, I realized that I didn't know that much either, and started to pursue, teacher training and attending lectures at the Tibet House, and even here at Menla Mountain with Bob Thurman, and trying to understand like the history and the background for myself, because I realized, I'm practicing and I started to teach, but I need to know what I'm offering. And then as far as the cultural piece that you're talking about, just noticing, I had an interesting entry to teaching because I actually started teaching more for nonprofits in Spanish. And then I started working in the studio world in New York City, and realizing that it was also, a business and, the questions of appropriation and, and for profit. I mean, not good or not questioning whether it's good or bad, but just really bringing the question, looking at that as far as the roots of where this is coming from. And I think I had that similar experience to you, where it was just like one step led to the next step, led to the next step of deepening, trying to deepen my understanding and trying to also like understand it from that transcultural perspective. And that's what led me also to CIIS. I was planning to be a social worker and somehow ended up in the East-West psychology program, you know, and learning through Debashish, who's the chair of our program, has been really, honestly, like transformative as far as the way I'm engaging with this, with yoga in general, beyond asana, and with the ideas, like the the transcultural piece is huge.
Yeah.
Could you please explain to the group exactly what the East-West Cultural Center does, what its meaning is?
Sure, yeah. So we're in a university called the California Institute of Integral Studies, which was started by Haridas Chowdhury, who was a disciple of Sri Aurobindo, and Bina Chowdhury, who Julie and Wendy know very well as well. And this was part of the countercultural movement in San Francisco in the 60s. And it started even in the late 50s, if I'm not mistaken, before that. But so it's a university that's founded on basically the principles of spirituality, of cross-cultural engagement, conversation. And out of it, and Haridas Chowdhury's work, he was really a pioneer in trying to bring integral yoga into transpersonal psychology. And so that's one way that he's really influenced transpersonal psychology as a scientific study and discourse. We're in a department called East-West Psychology Department. And so part of the work of this department is we use a light framework to kind of embark upon cross-cultural conversation and dialogue. And there's cardinal points that we use that may be helpful for this conversation as well. So we have East and West. So it's fairly clear in terms of the historical divide that has been there. We've inherited this idea of the East, of the Orient, for instance, as opposed to the West. And so that's one of those like kind of two polarities that would have different traditions, and learning how to engage and productively bring them together is a big challenge. In the past, we've in terms of like the Eurocentric models that have seemingly spread over the world, they are going to center Europe and the ways in which Europe has developed sciences and the humanities, and in my case, being a musician, musicology. But there's a lot of assumptions that go into that. So when it comes to studying outside of the West, there's a lot of baggage that's carried and projected into these cultures. And so the cross-cultural dialogue has usually been what's called Orientalist, which is projecting into this other that we can't necessarily know, but we know how we want to see them, right? And so that's one of the axes. Earth and world would be another one. So earth is the indigenous traditions. And so in this department, there's a lot of, there's shamanism and different types of earth-based practices and indigenous wisdom traditions that are brought in. And world would be the critical perspectives and kind of the contemporary. What is happening now in terms of how we are working with the confluence of East, West, and beyond, because even these binaries can become problematic.
So what does this greater understanding provide for you when you're finished with the classes? I mean, do you have degrees which enables you to go and teach or discuss or initiate programs elsewhere?
Yeah, well, we would have a master's in philosophy, I believe, of the humanities.
Yeah, it's a master's of philosophy.
Yeah, or a PhD. So, and it's an accredited university. It has been since the 60s at least. So, yeah, so it's a little bit on the periphery. It's not a mainstream institution, but because of that, there is a lot more. I think there's a lot more potential to experiment and to what I've been really I didn't expect this going into it, but I've really been empowered to understand myself as an activist. And in these times, I think that that's a really important part of how I'm understanding myself in this world, myself in relation to different world music traditions, for instance. And
But it doesn't focus on integral yoga particularly.
I mean, I think there's the Asian Contemplative and Transcultural degree that or concentration. I think it focuses on all the wisdom traditions of Asia and Southeast Asia, but there is I think, there's a strong core group of strong core curriculum that does focus on integral. Aurobindo is like such a presence, I think, in the department, and because of Haridas Chaudhry. So
Thank you.
yeah, of course.
Do you live in community, spiritual community?
No, I mean, it's a university, so no. We're studying, we're studying, and if you want to call Zoom, as one of our professors calls it, the sacred portal of Zoom is spiritual community. But I mean, it is a spiritual community in the sense that we're all connected. And I feel like there's one student here from the program.
yeah.
I've already met many of my cohort, and I do feel like there is a spiritual community. But I think it's spiritual. I think what I've discovered coming here, I'm from New York City. I'm from an immigrant family, so it's always like, what's the practical outcome, which is part of what I think you were asking. And I think no, oh, not you. When you were asking what's the outcome of the degrees, and even if you weren't asking, I'll just speak to it, because I think it comes back to a little bit of what Jonathan was talking about, like what's our relationship with this, with the Asian and like wisdom traditions, and where's the intersection. And I think like there's this idea, basically it's this, what I've gone from is this a shift from doing and outcomes to becoming and being. I think that's that's been the most transformative piece for me. Like I'm not, we live in a world where we have to worry about how we're going to live. But I think there's been a liberating experience. The most liberating part of this experience for me is just like, which connects back to the integral, this idea of like, who are we becoming? Or like, what is my aim? Who am I? And how do I follow that thread in the face of the world that's saying, you need, like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with your life? Like, what's the outcome here? And it's like, the outcome is that I'm going to be me. So, I mean, I think that's one of the things that makes a lot of the conversations that we have are like this, are about sort of the, going beyond, again, you can take it from here, but we were just talking about this, the world as it is, and the way that we inherit it, and the deprogramming and deconditioning from these frameworks, and opening up to the possibilities of like being in the world.
Yeah, the integral is held in different ways in the school as well. Debashish, in terms of our department, is very much rooted in the tradition, and is I would say quite an expert of Sri Aurobindo and the mother's written material and ideas, and is a practitioner. And one of the models that we use in this university is a scholar practitioner. So if we were only practitioners, then living in a spiritual community, like here, for instance, it can happen how it needs to happen. The scholar part is what you have to be able to take a step side, have 1 foot in and 1 foot out in a way, because the scholar is the part that is engaging in the historical practice of knowledge production, which has its history in the academy. And so knowledge production happens in a certain kind of format, in a certain form, in a way. And that's where you're engaging with other authors and other texts, and you're presenting, you can present your subjective experience, but it's also shared according to a certain format, which can be universalized in essence. Whereas just the practitioner you can produce knowledge, for instance, of your yogic practice, but how you bring that into conversation with people outside of your community. That's where the challenge lies in some cases. And so that's where the academy gives you an opportunity. Now, the academy has a whole history in being rooted in Europe. And so this is part of the activist part of how do we actually engage in this? so that, but not fall into the same habits that has been perpetuating it, and power structures and privileging of certain types of peoples or thoughts,
And knowledge
and knowledge. Yeah.
and ways of knowing, yeah.
Yeah. And so part of the title of this, this little talk, I guess, was a world making. And I think this is something that's been really interesting to me, because as a jazz musician or as a raga musician, I really felt that this music, it gave me a whole sonic world that really it would compel me to be in ways that I'm not habitually in the world. I would enter into playing music, and it would be a whole world in itself that had different types of, it gave me different types of experiences, or it gave me different ways of looking at the world.
Talk about.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanna tap into what you were defining integral, and that connects with the description of that you both mentioned. And then is when integral for me means the living experience of individuals and then receiving the knowledge, right? And then you mentioned, Jonathan, that you went to India, and your live experience in India was very unique because you were a citizen of other part of the world with another living experience. They inform you about your existence, and then when you place yourself in a different continent, in a different historical place, in a different XYZ, you were kind of like, whoa, what is this, right? And that was the question. But that was in India. When you were in India, you were the visitor, the learner, you were respecting all the traditions. The problem is the CIIS does very well is to tell us that we don't have to separate the cultural, the tradition from the work. And then what happens in, I'm gonna make it very framely here, in the North America countries, more than in Europe, because I don't live in Europe, is that we cut the historical, the cultural, the values of the traditions, and then we make them something that is very attractive to our ego individualism. There's this country based off, right? So when you say integral, for me is taking those barriers of the ego and then the individualism, being individuals, and actually place it back into the social norms of India in this case, or China and another's, or Japan and another's, or XYZ, where we actually learn their cultural knowledge. And I as a a student or like a PhD, whatever, is us bringing our individual perspective, like our living experience, into observation mode, and then actually have a conversation with myself and what is happening. And for me, is respecting the reality of the things that we are studying, taking the academy away, because that is what CIIS is trying, is to bring the academy, but very limiting the academy, actually is respecting what the culture, the knowledge is, and go very deep into the study of why they do what they do and how they do it, based on their cultural reality, not on our cultural reality. And for me, that is a very crucial point that we need to remember here, that's where CIIS is CIIS. And then we take the cult away, because as we have seen in history here, when a teacher of yoga comes here, it becomes a cult, because it changed you so profoundly without the context of the reality that they live, that becomes a cult. And we have seen that in Oregon, where this situation happened, and other places where now the cult of money is the primary goal of actually learning something from the traditions of the East. And so for me, as integral is about being there with not forgetting who you are, to give them respect, and then actually try to go in with your own personal living experience and translate your personal living experience into something that you can share with respect as a first person existence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Chagua. Yeah, really, really great points. And I guess that would be really related to where I was going when I talked about this idea of worlding, of like creating a world, or when you are engaged in a traditional practice, what happens and how have you received that? And where does it come from? What are its traditional roots? Absolutely. And I think that's where, for me, an interesting word that Debashish has used somewhat in place of spiritual is psycho-cosmological. And that's how I would really describe my experience with Eastern culture, Raga music, or even jazz in a sense, whatever. So I'm sure all of you have experiences where it's more than just how you may want to use this for the benefit of something in your life. It's more like it's a container that extends into community, into the land, into the sky. And it's actually a lot of these traditions, especially in the East, if we'll focus on that for now, it's like, for me, music wasn't just for the sake of music. It wasn't for the sake of entertainment, or it was really for this, it was a part of a yogic practice, which was a cosmology in which the individual was one part. Mm-hmm. And that's where this word psycho-cosmology, I think it helped me really see, oh, okay, so as I'm here in India, these roots go into the culture, into the earth, into the spirituality of the practitioners. And that is very helpful to help, I guess, fight against problems of cultural deterritorialization, which is another way of saying displacement, picking something up, picking and choosing, packaging it according to industrial standard that you can sell it, for instance. You put it in a little box and you take it up and you pick it up. And you don't have too much thought about the people that it's come from, or the impact that you have on the source of this psycho-cosmology in a way. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's really one of the big questions that everybody can think about in their own way. And there's no right or wrong here. It's just a matter of opening to that question. And sorry.
Well, I've been very interested about how you found music. And Raga music, is that, I don't really know what aspect of Indian music that is, but my limited understanding is that there's a very different musical scale, as opposed to, I guess, more, classical music. And how was the sounds that you were experiencing when you were going there to study music? How did that bring you into, how much did that transform you? Was that part of it? Were you becoming so fluent in it that it was no longer something different to you? I mean, I'm not sure.
Right.
I'm just wondering, because that could have been the mode that was created this transformation.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a really important question, is what was pulling me, for instance, what was attracting me to India? And this is where I did allude to this, but in being a Western, like being from Toronto, a Canadian, a Westerner, I did have certain images of Indian culture that are, I think, quite commonly experienced, like the whole movement of Indian music. There's a cultural history of how Indian music came to the West, Ravi Shankar, for instance, the Beatles, and so forth. And there's like a picture that we and some people might have been exposed to more of that picture, some people might not, but it's still, so what does that little bit that we get that's kind of traveled from India here, and how do we receive that? And so I think that's a big question, that if we're really, the invitation to consider our own relationship to Asian cultures and wisdom traditions and contemplative practices is really that. It's also a question of what is pulling you or attracting you there. And in my case, it was really, I felt like there was something lacking in my own world, like psychocosmology. I really felt that in my secular Western upbringing, there wasn't a spiritual foundation. There wasn't a ground that could actually contain my musical experiences. And it was always music that was asking these questions. But even in jazz music, John Coltrane and free jazz musicians were really using music towards a cosmological goal, a goal of becoming, or an aspiration to not only for social justice, that happened for sure. Through Archie Shepp, for instance, was very much used it. And there's a lot of people that were using free jazz as a form of social justice, which was very important. Coltrane was very interesting because he was part of that, but he was more explicitly into that cosmic, that universal. How can music be something that can take us into something that's even beyond the social structures, that timeless, eternal, right? And his music, to me, is really a ritual, a kind of like a social and a sonic ritual that prepares some kind of interface with a cosmological principle. And whether he accomplishes that or not, that's up to you to decide for yourself. But for me, that was something that I found in the shrieks and the cries of his music. And it kind of awoke me to, I think, something spiritual. And he was looking to India, for instance, and it was like, and as were a lot of people. But for me, it was more like my psychocosmology was not, it wasn't, I was critical of it. I felt there's something that's lacking here, you know? And so I think that that's another way in which looking these Eastern wisdom traditions and contemplative practices, it's not only about, let's say, leaving your own home and just leaving the West behind, or leaving, like for me, I'm talking about myself, I could just leave my problems behind, go to the romanticized Oriental, or the Orient, right? And just think that that's the utopia, right? And it's not about that. Like, that's where in my dissertation work, I've actually had to, Deborah has challenged me to say, well, how much did you buy into some kind of a commodified image of the romantic East? And I was like, well, that's interesting. I don't know. I ended up living there for 10 years. So it obviously wasn't a superficial relationship that I was invested in. It was something that drew me deeper into the earth, into the spirit, into the interpersonal cultural aspects. But it's something that has really helped me. And it's also helped me, where I'd like to go, is that it's really helped me in a way of finding a way to kind of create a new world making. And so I think that the activist kind of the tools for activism, whether that's social justice or if it's a micro activism that you're practicing with yourself, or if it's a cultural one or a cosmological one, an ontological one, meaning that you're confronting the container, the horizons of your own beingness, how you know yourself, and you're challenging that, and you're deconstructing and reconstructing. I think that the Asian wisdom traditions, contemplative traditions, are very important. And as the world has unquestionably become globalized, is unquestionably become, everything is under the pressure of capitalism. And in Asia too, obviously I lived there. This is everywhere now, but there's traditions that go back. There's traces of revolution in the Bengal, for instance, that are still, and the integral yoga was rooted in Sri Aurobindo's life. The questions that he was pursuing, the reason he was pursuing an integral yoga rather than just another kind of yoga, like maybe taking him to the Himalayas and allowing him to escape the worldly problems of politics. It was actually an engaged yoga, which was started with anti-colonial questions of power. And so that's where Debashish has this idea that's called ontological colonialism, which really means that to some degree, we all know ourselves through forces that are making ourselves, but there's a lot of forces in the world that are making us that in a way that don't serve us either. And we accept those, we inherit them. For instance, the way in which we're constantly being fed, advertisements that are kind of putting desires to consume inside into subconscious structures. The unconscious is actually a structure that is being colonized in some ways, right? And so I think the idea of contemplation, for instance, this is again was the theme of this department. Why contemplation? Yoga, music, the Eastern arts, they're all based in this very strong foundation of contemplation. And however that looks to you in contemplative studies, again, you can be actively contemplating your own freedom through resistance and through activism on the front line, or you can be kind of more passively contemplating existence and your universal, being within, the psychic being within. But the contemplation, the kind of like the single point concentration, the getting beyond habitual modes that are going to be coming from unconscious desires that are constantly trying to break our concentration on a psychic presence, because it's like we're being drawn. I'm hungry. I'm this. I want this. I want that. I want that person to like me. I want to wear this. You know what I mean? So the act of contemplation can be considered a revolutionary practice as well. In a way of making a different world. You want to add anything?
No, I was just laughing because I was relating. And I think I was just going to add, another point I know you wanted to kind of touch on self-making, besides self-making versus world making. And Wendy and I had a lovely conversation yesterday. I hope it's okay that I'm mentioning you about her time in Aurobindo and her family coming to, like basically not understanding, and we were relating on that front. And we had something in common, which is, again, she wanted to do social work initially, and then somehow found herself in Aurobindo and stayed for 7 years. And I kind of feel like it was a similar, not exactly the same, but similar thing. I had these ideas about how I wanted to participate in world making, how I wanted to contribute to change in the world, and I was going to do and be, and in a certain way. And what I came to realize was eventually when I landed at CIIS, it's like, oh, I'm here to figure out this self-making part, this part about like the ontological colonialism that you mentioned, like, oh, my consciousness is colonized. I think that it needs to look a certain way, even in my studies before CIIS, and I had similar questions or sort of unanswered questions as you in the yoga community, where I was like, is this it? Like, do we just teach, do you just move and do asana and like teach people? And is it all feel good? Is it an industry of feeling good? You come, you stretch, you breathe, and it just feels good. And is that it? Am I just here to make people feel good? Or are we here to kind of, I felt like there was more. I felt like, in my teaching, when I started teaching, I was that teacher who had the cool playlists and like 50 chaturanga up dogs. I was that person, and my classes were packed. And then I started to sort of inquire a little bit more and study more, and eventually found myself here. It's been not so packed because it's not as feel good. And I'm kind of I'm trying to bring some of what I'm learning into that space, but for me, it's very much that ontological piece that you're talking about, like this decolonializing my consciousness and my idea of what I was told I'm supposed to be in the way I showed up in this world. So I think that's another really important part that connects to the world making, because
yes,
as Wendy and I were saying, like we first have to, a lot of us at work is like, we have to start with ourselves. Like, how do we transform? How do we figure out what the truth is of our own becoming? And how do we move that way through the world? And the world making. So
yeah, that's beautiful. And then just a couple more ideas, and then I think we're going to play music. And I'm so honored that Steve G has joined us, and we'll do a little bit of an impromptu musical collaboration, a little bit of a contemplative listening practice as well. But it's interesting because Debashish, in his teaching of integral yoga psychology, he published a book recently about that, and he's been teaching this at the school. And one of the most striking things that I found about how he formulates these ideas is that there's a certain order of ideas that changed. And I found that I never really questioned the order of ideas in terms of I'm thrown into a world, right? I'm born into Canada with these parents, with this heritage, with this type of surrounding. And then I'm taught about how this world is. So there's metaphysics, there's a psychology. And I always felt that the way it was taught to me anyway, is that the metaphysics, the psychology, the theology, that's first. And then you have fit yourself into that, right? So your worldview that you accept kind of passively, you know, as a young maturing adult, you know, I accepted that and said, okay, I can see myself in these possibilities. But in Indian yoga traditions, and this Debashish is very clear about this, is that your goal comes first, and then the metaphysics, and then the knowledge production, and then the ways in which your metaphysical or your psychological or theological structure is kind of based on that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but your goals change as you evolve, and your whole, so it's constantly changing.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Which is why something like an integral yoga can never be, it can never be one goal for your whole life. It's like, and also how much do we actually know what we want? And who is the I asking that? So you've raised a whole wormhole, which I didn't want to go too much into, but this is why I think something like integral yoga is, as a practice, as giving us a foundation to think through these extremely complex problems that go against the grain of what we really inherit of let's say how we know ourselves, the subjectivity, the ego I, the cogito, which synthesizes reality and orders it into certain principles, and we decide how we want to navigate that and express ourselves, to individualize ourselves or individuate. So Debashish said, you go to India, you sit in front of a guru, and they say, you say, okay, I'm here to learn. And then the first question from the guru is, well, what's your goal? And then I will help you just figure out how to reach that goal. Is your goal to find a bliss that, or a samadhi that's outside of your kind of your embodied life? Is it a flight outside of the world? Are you looking for power in the world, coming to the tantric side or the Advaitic side before, or something of the two, or something completely different? I want to gain powers, siddhis, right? The tantric side. I'd like to be able to walk across this river. You know, that's another interesting and funny parable that a guru will show the disciple, and he works for 40 years so he can finally walk across the river, and then says, well, why did you actually want to spend 40 years doing that when you could have just taken the boat? You know, it's like, what a waste of, you know. So this goal of becoming, as it's something that we deeply know, but it's kind of, you could say it's forgotten or it's obscured by being thrown into a world that seems foreign to us. And as that goal kind of opens and emerges and changes and complexifies and brings new things into it. So I think the goal of becoming, metaphysics will help you realize that goal. And then there's a praxis or a practical application that again, based on your goal of becoming. And so I found this really actually quite profound, but rooted in that question of the goal of becoming is, what kind of world am I participating in creating? How am I building myself? And then how does that relate to others? And so it does come down to the questions of collectivity, of relationality to other humans, to other non-humans, to the earth itself. And I think that these, again, things that were not very well articulated in my own upbringing. I had nothing that helped me understand that I depend on the earth. I cannot exist without the earth. If I commodify the earth and sell it off without thinking much more than the capital gain, that is disastrous. Yet I didn't have the metaphysics or the praxis to actually engage in deepening myself and making my own kind of like subjectivity more porous, so that I can become and flow with the earth in different ways or whatnot, for example. So anyway, so these are just some of the ideas that I guess were interesting to both of us, that I think that can ground. We're gonna do some music, and then we're gonna go downstairs, and we're gonna continue the conversation in a less kind of formal, I mean, in a more homely way, I think. That was the idea anyway.
Yeah,
and yeah, but these are just some of the ideas that we wanted to share and to ask about that idea, which I think is really compelling me, is like, what kind of world are we creating? And there's no one vision, or it's unity and plurality. It's Aurobindo is really the place in the world that has been undergoing this type of an experiment for so long. And it's such an inspiring place to go and to be, because these are open questions. And as soon as that question becomes closed or fixed, or somebody says, I know the way, then you're going to end up in some kind of a hierarchical structure, which is absolute, rather than a hierarchical structure, which is open and fluid and can change, and the up can become the down can become the up, and that's really the grounds where CIS and this kind of discussion is really aiming towards a world that is based on a radical pluralism rather than some kind of an inclusivism. Because as soon as you say, I include you into my system, you're still centered yourself. My worldview is still holding my center, and I would love to include everybody. But being inclusive means that there's already a binary where you see, well, you're over here and I include you into my party. Okay, well, can you include me into your party? It's still unidirectional. And so the idea of opening to a world that doesn't need to be that way is actually really quite challenging, because we know ourselves so much based on the rational function, which operates according to the law of the excluded middle. You can't have unity and plurality coexist. There has to be one privilege, because the mind cannot deal with the paradox.
Just get rid of the mind.
Super mental. Yeah, and that has a lot. But when you inherit, like, as a scholar, academics is very much involved in the mind, just like jnana yoga is involved in the mind. It's a yoga of the mind, but it's not one that accepts the conditions of the mind. It's saying that the mind is it's like the mind is the helper, the mind is the bar. The ego is the helper, the ego is the bar. So it's kind of like trying to find that edge, make things porous, question the dynamics of what makes it work, and then slowly but surely transform so that new possibilities, new worlds can actually manifest. Yeah. So maybe with that, we can move to the music, and maybe we can just consider this as a contemplative listening practice that we can do together, and maybe carry some of these questions into your listening. And we can talk about that in the next, when we go downstairs. Yeah. And as well as your own experiences, and like that's what we prefaced, that's what we started with. I mean, we would like to hear from everybody, or who'd like to share about their own thoughts, their own experiences. But maybe this as a sonic world contemplative practice, let's try to engage in those ways. So can I invite Steve up to play?
So welcome. It's so lovely to have you, to be here with you. Actually, it's my first time at Matagiri, and Wendy and Julian have been just pure love. Thank you for hosting us. My name is Judi Checo, and I'm here with Jonathan. We're both from, well, many of you already know Jonathan, but we're here from the California Institute of Integral Studies. We're students in the East-West Psychology program, and we just had this idea to come out and come to the Aurobindo Center here and connect with you and connect with the community. So yeah, we'll do a little embodied movement with yoga, which is what yoga is. And we'll start out from a seated position. So again, finding a comfortable way to do that for yourselves, up on a bolster or a blanket. And beginning with a little bit of pranayama. So I'm going to invite you actually to bring your right hand on top of your left and position it in a way where you're able to connect your thumbs for Dhyana Mudra. And just then let your hands rest wherever feels comfortable for you. Yeah, and if you need to have your legs straight out, if that's more comfortable, please do whatever works. The chairs are also there at any time if you want to transition there. And sitting tall. If it feels safe to do so, closing your eyes. And if that doesn't feel comfortable, you can just let your gaze rest gently on the floor or somewhere in front of you. Soft gaze. And just take a moment to arrive. To welcome your whole self. Maybe notice how you're arriving, how your body is feeling in this moment without to the best of your ability without judgment, just noticing and inviting your body to be present, and you're noticing your thoughts, your mind, consciousness there, and inviting that to be present in whatever way it's arriving, welcoming yourself in whatever way you're feeling today. And Dhyana Mudra, which we're holding, the way that I learned it is the meanings that I know for it are empty vessel, but also a calling forth of like knowledge with a capital K, like divine knowledge and wisdom, or vidya. And we're gonna combine this mudra with a little movement and ujjayi pranayam breath. And ujjayi meaning, as many of you probably already know, victorious one, the victorious breath. Inviting you today to think, as we're moving here, that we're calling forth that essential nature within us, that part of us that's eternal and steady and divine. And so taking a breath in through your nose, deep breath in. And for this first round, breathe out through your mouth as if you're fogging a mirror, constricting the back of the throat. So get a couple of practice rounds going. We'll do that 2 more times, breathing in deeply through the nose, exhaling through the mouth, as if you're fogging that mirror. And 1 more like that. Inhale through the nose. Beautiful. So you're that oceanic sound of the ebb and the flow of your breath. And then inhale through the nose. Exhale with the mouth closed. Same action though, that fogging of the mirror. Slight constriction in the back of your throat. Inhale through the nose. Exhale. And 1 more inhale. And exhale. And we'll bring some movement now to that breath, connecting the breath to the movement. So we're going to inhale through the nose, and as we do so, slowly lift the hands in that Dhyana Mudra up towards your heart, the sternum next to the heart. And as you exhale, slowly lower the hands back down. A few more times like that. Inhale, the hands lift up, feeling the breath move up from the base of your spine towards your heart space, all the way through the crown of your head. And as you exhale, moving the hands down slowly, feeling the breath move down from the crown of the head to the base of the spine. Inhale, lifting up. Exhale, lowering. Inhale, up. And exhale down. 1 more like that, the Ujjayi breath. Inhale. And exhale. Beautiful. And then now, as you inhale, keeping the Ujjayi breath going, open the arms out wide, bend the elbows, cactus shape. Now feeling the breath sort of in the ribs and the sides of the body. Inhale, and as you exhale, bring the left hand to the heart, right hand atop the left. We'll do a few rounds like that. Inhale, opening. Feeling the breath expand the ribs, the front and the back of the body. As you exhale, left hand to the heart, right hand atop the left. Good. Inhale, opening. Exhale. Bringing the hands back in. Inhale, opening. And exhale, bringing the hands back in, and one more. Inhale, opening. And exhale. Back in. Good. And then pausing here. Hands to the heart and just noticing your heartbeat, perhaps any other sensations. Breathing naturally now, normal breath in, normal breath out. And bringing your awareness to the consciousness of your heart, to this sort of seat of the soul, seat of vidya. And then inhale, and as you exhale, let your hands and your arms come down to your legs gently. Good. And if you're working with any shoulder situations or any situation at all today, just inviting you to take care of yourself. As one of my teachers always says, that's advanced practice. So it's not so much about what we're doing, but do what you can. We're going to work a little bit with our shoulder girdle now. We're going to do a little functional movement. So inviting you to palms up, you're going to bring that right, I'm going to try to mirror you best I can, that right arm across the body over to the left. And then when you go as far as you can, you're going to lift the arm up and only go as high, again, as your shoulder allows, feels easeful. You're going to look up towards that hand, that right hand. And then as we're going to bring it back, turning the palm back behind us so that the shoulder girdle is internally rotated now, and then down. A little circle action here. Good. And we're going to bring it back around 2 more times like that. Arm comes across the body, palm up. Right arm lifts, and it could be just to here, that's fine. And then you begin to turn the palm back as you bring it back behind you. And I'll cue the breath here. Inhale, arm comes forward, across, and up to wherever is easeful for you. As you exhale, palm moves back and down. And then when your hand comes down, your arms comes down, let that hand land gently on the floor behind you. And now bring your left hand to your right leg and take a gentle twist here. And you can bring the hand a little more behind the right hand a little more behind your back. So you can get the twist a little more fully. If your neck feels pretty good, just let your gaze, your head move towards that right shoulder, again, to wherever your neck allows. Keep the spine tall and the breath full. Drawing the tailbone down, head up. One more breath here, inhale and exhale. Good. And then we'll inhale, come back through center, nice and easy. And exhale, both palms back to rest on the legs. Other side. So as you inhale, bring that left arm across the center line of the body towards the right, and then lift up. Look up. As you exhale, turn the palm back behind you and let the arm move towards the back. Inhaling, bringing the arm forward and across and up. There might be a few breath cycles as you're doing that. And then exhale, arm comes back, palm turns back. Beautiful. One more like that. Inhale, left arm across the midline, slowly up, look up, lengthen, lift the heart. And as you exhale, turn the palm back behind you and gently let the hand land on the floor. Bring it in closer to your tailbone, and then bring your right hand to your left knee. Feel the spine and feel the belly, the ribs and the chest moving towards that left side. Let your gaze, your head move towards the left, whatever degree your neck allows you to. Find a little softness in your face, a little softness in your shoulders. And some ease in your breath. Lovely, everyone. And then inhale, come back through center. Good, and exhale once you're here. And then go ahead and bring the soles of the feet together. Since we're all on the floor, I'll just proceed with my mat plan. Microphone a little bit this way, soles of the feet together, so that we're in Baddha Konasana, or a little butterfly shape here. And again, however that your knees might be higher up, that's okay. Wherever you land here is fine. And then bring your hands to the fronts of your shins and resist your hands against your shins against the hands to lift the heart up a little bit more. Draw your tailbone down. And usually this is where we get really stiff in the face and the shoulders. So inviting you to just take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, just relax a little bit. Relax the shoulders, relax the face, any degree. Just 2 more breaths here. Press the feet gently in towards each other so that your outer hips activate. Good, deep breath in. Full breath out, and just 1 more here. Inhaling and exhaling. Beautiful. And then now, go ahead and straighten just your right leg out in front of you and bring the sole of your left foot inside of the right leg. Beautiful. This, trying to mirror you. The mirroring gets tricky. It's my opposite. Okay. Thanks, Jonathan. All right. And now we're going to bring the left hand to the right knee, right hand behind you. Take a gentle twist. So you're moving towards that knee. And maybe whatever side you're on, I'm going to mirror that side. Good. And resist a little bit, your hand against your knee, knee against your hand. And then turn your gaze towards me, towards the front of the room now. Good, breathe in here. As you breathe out, stay as you are and just bring that hand that was on your knee on your leg and lift your back arm and take a little lengthening stretch towards the front. Good. Thanks for being good sports with the left, right. Whatever side you're on, do that one. Good. Breathe into your rib cage, your chest, lift your heart up any degree. Good. Inhale deeply and exhale fully. And then now, similar to what we were doing there in the beginning, we're going to look down, lower the arm, and kind of bring it in this sweep towards the front, towards that front leg. Breathe in, lift the heart and the chest a little bit. As you breathe out, let yourself fold just to any degree. Good. Find some softness and ease in the face and the shoulders, in the breath. I always joke we get very serious during yoga sometimes, so just any degree of loosening up. And then as you inhale, come up nice and easy. Good. And then we'll just staying here. This is the part where we're gonna kind of move into a little bit of a complicated shape. So you're gonna bring, not super complicated, your hands down and lean a little bit more into the bent leg side, and then just sweep the other leg back and stack them however you can on top of each other. So it's like little mermaid action here. Mermaid on the rock, really Bahar Vajrasana, which is what we're going for. And we're going to bring that left hand to the right knee, right hand behind you. Or for you, it's right hand to the left knee, left hand behind you, and take a little twist. So my idea behind today was this theme of wisdom and drawing forth our essential nature and our, maybe Aurobindo would say, psychic being. And now stay exactly as you are. You're in this twist. You're just going to look forward towards me, and towards that front shoulder. And lift your heart, breathe in, breathe out. And again, as you're breathing, calling forth that knowledge with a capital K, that essential nature within you, that inner sage. And then come back through center. Good. However you unwind out of the mermaid legs, bring the soles of the feet together again one more time. Good. And this time, opposite side, right? So you'll straighten your left leg, bring the sole of the right foot in. Bring your right hand behind you, left hand to the knee, and take the twist. So the other side, whichever side you didn't do, do that side. It's been a while since I've taught in person. So I'm like, oh, right, left, right, mirroring. Good. Breathe deeply. Find a little ease in the shape. And maybe that's just literally through that return to Ujjayi, if that's helpful, through that deep breathing, oceanic breathing, victorious breathing. And then keeping everything as it is, you'll just turn your head towards your gaze and maybe even your chest a little bit towards that front leg so that you're keeping the twist, and you'll bring that left hand to your left leg, lift the back arm behind you. And the twist is still in place, allowing your chest, your ribs, and your heart to open to the side here. Reaching through your fingertips, your top fingertips, to lengthen the side body, breathing into the ribs, that entire length of your side body that's opening here. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. And exhale. And then looking down, similar, that same sort of circular motion we did in the beginning, lower your arm down to your leg, turn your torso towards that front leg, and melt, soften. You don't have to be all the way down. Wherever you are is the right place. And just soften, relax the shoulders, relax the face, relax the breath, ease in the breath. Good. One more inhale here. Exhale. And then slowly bring yourself up to sit. Place your right hand on the floor just so you can lean, tip, move in that direction as much as you need to, and bend the top leg so that it's stacked. Again, in this mermaid shape. This is Vajrasana 1, very loose version. And then we'll bring the left hand to the right knee, right hand behind us, and take the twist here. Lovely, everyone. And just feel into that shape. Take a moment to breathe into it. So you're bringing your whole energetic self, your breath, your prana into the shape. Maybe even again, bringing Ujjayi back if that's useful. Calling forth that divine, wise part of you, essential nature. Unchanging, ever present. Then turn your gaze towards the front, towards your front shoulder, towards the front of the room. It's okay to smile, only if you want to, though. I don't force anyone to do that. But, you know, good. Wisdom and essential nature can be joyful. I think that's the argument that Aurobindo was bringing in to some degree, and then come back through center. Good. And then we'll just sit in Sukhasana just for 1 minute. And coming back to our Dhyana Mudra, right hand on top of left, thumbs connecting. Closing the eyes if that feels comfortable. And if not, soft gaze wherever is easeful for you. Returning to the Ujjayi breath, inhaling, feeling the breath move up from the base of your spine to the crown of your head and out through the sides of your ribs, 3-dimensional awareness of the breath. And as you exhale, feel the softness of your shoulders, your chest, and your abdomen. The breath moving down, inhaling. Calling forth again that victorious self, Exhaling. Inhaling. And exhaling. And just pausing here, breathing naturally for just a few moments. Perhaps meditating on your heart chakra, your Anahata chakra. Seat of Vidya, and of the psychic being, our soul. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and gently come out. And thank you. Thank you all.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Steve.
Wonderful.
So that's a little bit. That's a little bit of what we were able to marinate in this oral tradition. Of what in Indian music is called Guru Shishya Parampara. So there's the teacher and there's the students. And the Parampara is that tradition. And it's that quality of marinating in something. Just taking it in. Fascinating sidebar to that is that was a classical piece, but it was totally improvised. So thinking about how those two seemingly contradictory concepts come together, that's the beauty of this music. And I love what Judi said before about, and Jonathan, that this whole exploration of something from, in this case, another culture, another world, the world of the East, is I would like to redefine the word spirituality as truly knowing oneself with some kind of authenticity of self. And it's only through that that we can put out something into our world, which is a benefit to others. So it becomes the base, and all of these practices that come from India, from China and Japan, I'd say Japan and India in particular, really have this threefold function of the synchronization between mind and body, and then ourselves and our community. And then this further element, which of course Indian music is so much aligned with time of day. So we're talking about our relationship to our natural world and whether we really are in sync with our natural world. And for me personally, these are the gifts that I feel India offered.
What do you mean by time of day?
For hundreds of years, I mean, I find this fabulous. We were playing in a form called North Indian classical music, Hindustani classical music, and for hundreds of years there has been a relationship between playing certain intervals, certain notes at a particular time of day. So I'd like to imagine that there's a resonance between those notes, those colors. We played a piece that is played in the late afternoon, you know. And it's funny because Jonathan had his esraj tuned to something for his concert tonight. And he said, no, we can't play that, you know. The gods will get a message, you know. You know? So it's a wonderful concept. At twilight, for example, both dusk and dawn, you get scales that have the ambiguity of that shifting light of bardo, some unsettled quality. You don't know quite where you are. Is it getting darker? Is it getting lighter? And the music really just captures that. Stunning.
Yeah.
So that connection with the natural world, and of course, in cultures prior to our own, everybody had more of a connection with the natural world. You went to sleep when it got dark, you were up during the day, and everything was indoor, outdoor. So it's a little bit of a stretch for some of us to embrace that in our world, but it's very much an integral part of this music.
Yeah, I believe it is unique to North Indian music, how strictly the time of day is adhered to. And it is interesting in my experience. And one of the reasons why I wanted to live in India was that I wanted to undergo constant experiences that were recommended by the tradition. So playing these ragas at these times of day, going to the Himalayas. There are certain ragas that are like Kedar, for instance, is a raga that Kedarnath is a Himalayan mountain. Go to Kedarnath and try to experience why is this raga associated with this in some way. And there was the rational and maybe the more rational scientific side that said, well, how can you prove, well, just because your guru said it's better? Well, no, undergo self experimentation, undergo self and community, like, you know, sitting with my guru at the time, experimentation. And the subjective science of yoga is like that. It's more about turning inward and seeing, what does this do to you? If it doesn't do anything to you, then that's a fair result. Have you tried it enough times for you to know that?
Well, maybe you just have to do it again.
Exactly. So I really felt being immersed in this whole world view, it actually slowly but surely, really, it grew from the outside in, from the inside out. And I cultivated these types of relationships.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it's like to the mind, it's something that is escapable. You can't really prove scientifically that these intervals should only be played at this time. But is that even an important question? It's more like, what does it do to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I really felt that I mean, both of us share that it's changed us
Mhm.
so fundamentally,
Truly.
so deeply. We were open to those questions, you know?
Have you felt in composing different types of play like something that you could notice as a difference in temperament or in relation to playing music or particular types of play? What's up? Does it have an effect also the composing part?
Steve, you want
Composing?
Yeah, in relation to the different types of.
Well, in this repertoire, well, for example, 1 or 2 years ago, during January, I played that Twilight Raga at 5:30 until 6:30 every night. And I played it, I was inside, but I didn't have any light on in the room. And I just played, literally tried to play to the light, to the quality of light. And I was journaling, so I was also writing down. And the light every night was different because of the weather and whether the sun was really illuminating what was in front of me or not. But I tried to just really embrace myself as a, kind of you could say as a yoga practice. Every night, I'm just going to sit and play this piece at that time of night to try to take in the, I guess, more and more subtlety and nuances of it. And again, it's a traditional piece. There's a structure to it, but the note by note choices were spontaneous. So they'd be spontaneous in relationship to the way the sun was illuminating a tree, or if it was snowing.
Is the nature of Raga music a classical structure on which you improvise, or that's something that just happens?
Well, it's classical. No, it's a classical structure. And a person who really knows the music, you could play 1 or 2 notes and they'll know immediately which piece you're going to play. Because the melodic contours and the architecture of certain phrases that you play are what's the classical element to it. But this idea, I love just repeating this word, marinating. You hear your guru, your teachers, or you hear many people playing the same piece many times, and you begin to hear with the way you can enter it spontaneously, but still be in that world. You're not noodling around free. And I believe that's what gives this music its strength and its power, you know, rather than what would be just an ambient stroll through the forest, which could be wonderful, which could be just the thing you need. But this is something a little different.
Is this music that's written down, or do you learn it by? Yeah.
There's a little crib sheet you can write down memory aids, but I don't think anyone could really play this music from the heart without having the oral transmission.
Yeah, there are examples of somebody notating something like an alap, a short alap, and then having Western musicians read it. And as music, it works. It's not the raga, but it does something. So I think there's something that, it's completely like all music. The page is only a diagram for what to get beyond it, you know. So,
but you are improvising within your framework.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a funny use of the word improvising.
Yeah.
It's different than what a jazz player does when they improvise.
Right.
I mean, I've played with that word for years now because it means something different.
Yeah, and this would be again like one of those kernels in my academic pursuit, but I found exactly that kind of that block, because as a jazz musician, when I opened to raga music, I felt, oh, they're improvising just like me. And every year I spent in India studying this music, the more I realized it's very different. Now, there is something about being off a page and being unique to the moment that you could say that, yeah, a jazz improviser, basically unique to that moment, an Indian raga musician is playing the raga unique to that moment. But the amount of structure and the depth of expressive nuance that's very particular, the tuning, all of this is there's so many particularities. And so in some of my academic work is actually, again, when you get into understanding cultural history, you get into the differentiation of how is it that people came to similar things differently. And that really helps you realize that they are different.
Yeah.
They don't need to be the same. A jazz improviser, it will never be a raga musician. It's dangerous to think otherwise. And I sort of was one of those people, but it's sort of like jazz improvisation has a whole other cultural root based on different questions, different problems that they were encountering.
But if you can shed being conceptual, which of course is impossible for us, the blues. The blues has an element that is indescribable when it's really deeply settled, and it's very similar to a particular note in a raga. You look at an audience, and for people that someone really knows the music, you'll play a certain note, and they'll all, they'll just shake. It's the way you get goosebumps when you hear one note from John Coltrane. So that quality is something that perhaps is more of a universal element, and we can't conceptualize these things. Right. It just is.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
How much do you find yourself expressing your own voice, or actually losing yourself to what might be a personal voice and saying, I'm goalless, which would be great, in my opinion. But I find that I'm just curious, as you engage with these sounds and learn these structures, and you came from a jazz tradition, and you were thinking about, well, here's my voice in part of a conversation, or I'm going in the opposite direction of this meeting.
Yeah. What's your experience, Steve?
The very first thing you said, you lose yourself in it. There are times when I'm playing where I feel that I'm so in sync with the music. I play in front of a beautiful stream, and I get the feeling that if I've really entered the raga, it's like the undercurrent of the water, and I'm not particularly doing it. I'm floating along, and there's an effortless quality to just reach out to a note, to a musical phrase. And actually, one of the wonderful things, if you watch an Indian singer, they have a tremendous amount of hand gestures, and they're literally pulling those notes out of the sky, or holding them, cradling them, loving them. I mean, it's just, when it's just completely in sync, it's marvelous, because it is not about the person. It's not about the person.
Yeah, I could share in my experience, and I have two main gurus that I spent most of my time with, and each one of them was approaching music as yoga, but I found that the ways in which they expressed their experiences of the raga and the ways they kind of invoked it in me was very different. Now, interestingly enough, one of them was a fully integral yoga practitioner. The other was more a tantric practitioner, but he also had a devotional practice to the mother, which was an amazing coincidence. I didn't know that when I first started learning from him. But it was very interesting, because one of my gurus would talk about, you prepare yourself so that you can withstand the kind of the cosmic force of this raga, but you really are channeling. He's seeing the raga come phrase by phrase almost, and he's hollow himself. So it's really like you're channeling this deity. That would be one kind of phenomenology, or one way of describing his experience of ragas. Now, my other guru, it was more coming from the inside out. It was more like you're conjuring. It was really more akin to a magical situation where the raga would intoxicate you, or it would kind of take you away in a flow, like a strong. And that was very interesting and very different. But again, even within India, these individual differences, slightly different cultural backgrounds, different spiritual containers within the Hindu tradition itself. It's kind of, there's so many different ways of approaching it. And I think that I've learned from both gurus, and I think that different experiences happen at different times in different places with different people. And but I think in both cases, it is really the individual, the tapasya of the individual is preparing, like the tapasya means like the kind of consecration, the surrender to the ritual. Because really a raga in one sense is a sonic ritual. And if you learn, you immerse yourself, you marinate in the way in which your guru prepares the ritual. And over the course of time, you learn the kind of architectonics of this ritual. And it may become different. Like my guru is different than his guru, for instance. Over time, things do individualize accordingly. But at the same time, it's like everybody has their own kind of architectonic, and this ritual, in a way, the sonic ritual, it's just really an interface to what is beyond, and so how is it that it floods in, or that you open to it, or that it intoxicates you, or it's I think it's very interesting, a really interesting question. But I think a flow state is something that, like flowing with the raga, like in terms of a meditation, just meditating, and as a playing the music, I'm not doing too much different than you are listening, but you're really identifying with this melody, and this melody is just the single point concentration. It's a meditative device, and I think that's one thing that we all share, is this melody is kind of keeping us just honing in, and at a certain point there may be a rupture.
It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Yeah. Great pleasure. Yeah. Great pleasure. And thank you, Judi. You want to come up here? But maybe we can end here, because we have been going for two hours. Yeah. And we can continue, the people in person here, we can continue our conversations informally downstairs. Yeah, okay. But thank you all for being here, and wow, and thank you, Steve. This was very unexpected, and such a beautiful and rich addition to the afternoon.
Yeah. What a treat.